everyone, to another episode of A.IdlePodcast, the podcast where I do weekly book reviews. This week, I read The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde, which is a stage play about the duplicitous nature of a couple of guys in London in the late 1800s. Now, Oscar Wilde may sound familiar to you because he's, mentioned in English classes across the globe. He's a poet and a playwright from Dublin, and his most esteemed work is The Picture of Dorian Gray. Now, The Importance of Being Earnest was written and released in the late 1800s, and I would classify this as one of those simplistic stage plays, being that it's very straightforward. It's a comedy with 3 acts. It's written with a character dialogue with action descriptions, which is probably the main difference between this and like a regular book. It adheres to the time period of the late 1800s. In the tone, it's dramatically outrageous in a funny way. It's a comedy that almost seems like a parody of what life was like in that era. And you'll see just by the way that the characters act. Now, the title is very important here because earnest serves as a few different things in this book. When we talk about the actual word earnest, it means to be serious with intention, to have some sort of sincerity, as well as importance. So why is it important to live this way? Well, because it's important to live like an honest human being. And what we see is that there begins to be this double meaning for the word earnest, because that is also the name of one of the characters in the book. And we'll get into that in a moment. Now, there's a good amount of irony by way of foreshadowing in this play. So, the character desires are revealed at the beginning of the play, and what we see is that it ultimately comes to fruition by the end of it. So, for example, spoiler alert, Jack lied about having a brother the entire play, only for all of us to find out that he actually does have a brother. And so him kind of speaking these lies that seemingly came out of nowhere, I might add, actually proved to be true. But then we also have the example of Gwendolyn stating that she can only love somebody by the name of Ernest, and this posed somewhat of a problem for our character. But again, what we find is, spoiler alert, Jack's real name is revealed to be Ernest by the end of the play. So our characters are uninformed of a lot of what's going on in their lives, but what we see is that a lot of what they were discussing in the beginning, proved to be true. And lastly, when we're talking about writing style here on literary devices, we have a few examples of symbolism. The first being Bunbury, which I had no idea what it was when I was first reading this play. Obviously, as you keep reading, you understand what's going on, but in an effort to keep everyone informed, Bunbury essentially represents lying. So when you hear any of the characters say that they're going Bunburying, they're lying about where they're going. So that's the simplest way to put it. But also the name Ernest on the other side represents the truth. And you don't really get that whole scope of the symbol until you get to the end of the book, when it is revealed that Ernest is actually who Jack really is. Okay, so we have our characters here, and I have separated them into 3 groups. So the main characters, number 1, Jack, which I've actually put in parentheses, Jackass, because, hear me out, he lies for no reason. I don't understand why he's lying. Whereas with other characters, in a second we'll see why Algernon, lies about whatever. But Jack, he just lies about having a brother for time away. in my opinion, there's no reason for this, especially considering the time period. He's the man of the household. If he wanted to go have some time in the town, he'd just be like, yeah, I'm going to the town, and that's it, and y'all not coming. I don't understand why he was lying. But that goes into the part of the kind of exaggerated, dramatic aspect of stage play. So Jack has this whole thing going on inside of him, I guess, but also externally, Jack versus Ernest. He created two separate personas, and he voluntarily keeps it up. So he never volunteered the information or came clean, per se, to any of the characters. It kind of just came out. He was forced to tell the truth. Kitty Boo Boo was acting up again. Okay, she got up. Okay. So Jack never really told the truth. It just kind of came out. Which it gets me even more mad at him, because there was no reason for him to lie. But anyway, he's also one of the characters that is connected to everyone else in the story in some fashion. And his actions are the ones that influence the plot. So his lying is essentially what put us all down this path of narration here. And he is loved by Gwendolyn. And towards the end, he is redeemed as Ernest. So he gets a chance to live a second, or I should say his true life, by the end of the book. Now, Algernon, or Algie, hilarious. He is the instigator of conflict, and he's the one that is calling out the tough decisions of the other characters. He's the goofiest of the bunch. And I would say if you had to put him in one of those, typical characters of a play, he's kind of like the jester of the play. He's always joking around, doesn't really take anything seriously. I would describe him as chaotic, but also mischievous. He's not trustworthy, according to Jack. He's fascinating to Cecily, and he's also redeemed by Cecily. So this was my favorite character of the entire book, because there's seemingly no real reason behind his actions besides him just having fun with everything and everyone. So that was pretty funny. He's also irresponsible, and that's shown by his many debts and all that. So now we have the scapegoats of the book, or of the play. So first we have Ernest, who is described as wicked, bad, and needing guidance. And he is impersonated at some point by both Algernon and Jack. This is a fictional man within this fictional play that can do no wrong in the eyes of Gwendolyn and Cecily, and therefore is desired by both of them. Now keep in mind, Ernest is kind of intangible for the majority of the play, much like Bunbury. So this is someone described as an invalid, sick, and needing assistance constantly. And he's used exclusively by Algie. And this name can be also used as a verb. So essentially moonlighting. Algie's just lying to be somewhere else. He's going Bunburying. He's lying so he can get out of something. So both of these two, Ernest and Bunbury, are used as scapegoats to kind of get out of things or blame things on. They're just used for the characters' benefits, in particular Algernon and Jack. And lastly, the two, I would say, the ultimate caricatures of innocence in dramatic young women are Cecily and Gwendolyn, because they're so just dramatically in love and I'll die if I can't be with you. They're that type of character. So both of them are they're innocent because they have no idea what's going on until everything kind of blows up, but they also hold this place in society as well-mannered young women who are of acceptable social standards. Okay. Oh, there's another group of characters, which I would describe as the ones with the common sense, and that would be Miss Prism and Lady Bracknell. And we're going to touch on them within the themes here and the motifs, but they're the only ones, it seems, with any type of common sense. Although I guess that can be argued as well. So the first theme here is duplicity, obviously. And this means deceitful in speech and action, or acting in two different ways. So it's funny because we have two types of duplicity. Algernon lies for pleasure. He lies to get out of unpleasant engagements, or he just lies to have a joke with Jack to play a trick on him. Whereas Jack strives to live two separate lives in two different areas, and he ends up maintaining this farce for love. I still don't completely understand why he started lying in the first place, but he ultimately keeps it up because he is in love with Gwendolyn and he's sold her this lie of who he is. But then also with the names, it's so funny how Cecily and Gwendolyn are like, the way that they describe the love of their lives. Cecily says at one point that she can only love, or no. Cecily says she loves Ernest and she can never like anyone or love anyone by the name of Algernon. Whereas Gwendolyn said that she's always dreamed of loving someone by the name of Ernest and she can never love or marry anyone by the name of Jack. So it's like the name game here, like, which makes no sense at all because ultimately you're in love with the person, right? So the name really shouldn't matter, but that goes back to, again, the character of a young woman that is just completely dramatically in love with this person and is essentially pledging allegiance to them in every way, including their name. So, okay, second theme here is ignorance. Gwendolyn and Cecily, they are out of the loop on the true identities of their partners, and eventually this ignorance leads to the uncovering of the truth when they start having a conversation and they realize, what's going on. And then Jack also has some part of ignorance about his past. His familial roots are kept from him unintentionally for decades, his whole life. And so he does ultimately get the closure regarding his family's past towards the end, but he's another character that had to live within ignorance for a while. Last theme here is respectability, and this is just the ability to be respected or accepted by society, particularly in this time period. Even when we talk about the Bridgertons, which is set at the beginning of the 1800s, this is a big deal for people, and it includes class. Do you have wealth or do you not? Do you own houses? Do you have investments? Status, what type of family do you come from, which is particularly a big thing for Jack when he wanted to marry Gwendolyn. He didn't know where he came from, and that was seen as unacceptable. But most importantly, particularly for the women of the time period, your behavior, your adherence to the social standards determined whether you were worthy of having respect from the greater society. Lady Bracknell is someone that I think exemplifies respectability to the T. This is because she's a social climber, and we don't find this out until towards the end, definitely Act 3 of the play, that it makes sense as to why she is the one that is reinforcing these social standards so unrelentlessly and so dramatically, and it's because she herself did not start out with this amount of wealth. So to her, everyone around her, everyone that she connects with, her family, who her daughter marries, everyone has to be held to a very high standard of respectability because she probably just doesn't want to lose her spot. And so she's one of the main ones that is like enforcing the social rules, etiquette, all that good stuff. So she is the main enforcer here of respectability. And then I have just two motifs that are kind of like themes that are just in the background. First of all, there's this emphasis on German language and understanding and learning German language. And this is as relating to respectability. Understanding and reciting German is seen as, you know a little bit more than everyone else. And it also gives you that access to remain a proper part of society. So we see this mostly with Cecily when she is going through her studies and is kind of being forced to learn German and, stay on top of things. And second motif here, health privilege. So what we see is that, generally speaking, health is seen as a privilege to be earned. And this is exemplified by both Miss Prism and Lady Bracknell. So Miss Prism says, I am not in favor of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so let him reap. So she is talking about the actions of a man and how she's not about to jump up and help somebody when they're facing the consequences of their actions. Lady Bracknell says, I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or die, nor do I in any way approve of this modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. So she's pretty funny because at one point when she finds out, or she thinks that both of Jack's parents have passed, I think she says something along the lines of like, that's careless. Like, to have one parent that's passed is seen as like, okay, that's fine, but to have both, like, that's super careless. So she's someone that, like, when we're talking about physical health, she has a no nonsense when it comes to helping people, who are sick or who are in this time period called invalids, which is crazy. But for them, for both Miss Prism and Lady Bracknell, they're responding to the continued intermittent absence of both Algie and Jack when it comes to them always going off and doing whatever, but them having the excuse that, oh, I'm going to help Bunbury because he's sick again, or I'm going to help Ernest, my brother, who is out here running wild. And they're just like, look, it's not your responsibility to keep helping this grown person. They have to decide for themselves what kind of life they're going to live. Now, obviously, that's a little dramatic when we're talking about health-wise, but it makes sense for them to react this way to the consistent absences of both of their associates. Okay, so my review, I really enjoyed this. There's an emphasized goofiness of each character. Algernon is absolutely hilarious to me. And like I said before, I feel like this is almost like a parody of how people acted during this time period. There's definitely a simplistic lesson learned by Jack at the end that he needs to stop lying. And there's a healthy incorporation of irony and foreshadowing within the dialogue that I felt was well placed. So for me, especially reading this from like a writer's standpoint, I think this is a good blueprint for stage playwrights because it's easy to follow. It's easy to follow the character arcs and the intentions and all that good stuff in the plot. So I really enjoyed this. And is this a reread? Yeah, this is definitely a reread. I'm going to keep this forever. Now, being that this is a stage play that was released over a century ago, there's obviously some performances out there. So you can find actually the live stage play. You can find a few versions of it on YouTube for free. I watched the Bethany Lutheran College version, which was absolutely fantastic. I found the play to be like a true comedy. It was very funny. I laughed the whole time. The characters were a little bit more expressive, whereas with the film adaptation that was done in 2002, which was 20 years ago, I felt that the tone was more dramatic. It was definitely still funny, but the characters were a little bit more serious. But they did have the freedom to change locations and give you more visuals, to give more context to the themes or the characters and their thoughts. The dialogue and the conversations stay the same for the most part. And it also ends with a funeral for Bunbury, which I thought was kind of funny because it symbolizes the end of the duplicity for all of the characters. So the film was good. I definitely prefer the live version, or maybe the version I saw from Bethany Lutheran College was just so amazing. I don't know. I'm going to try to watch another version, but it's 2 hours long, so I don't really have time, but I'm going to try to watch another one. But I definitely think this is really great, and I think it's awesome that you can see it on YouTube for free, especially with all of the, restrictions with code and stuff for theaters nowadays. Definitely, I would read this and then watch the stage plays. It was great. So my only takeaway here, my takeaway for the characters and also for us in real life, don't be goofy, okay? You are a grown person. You don't need to invent a scapegoat to live the life that you desire. It makes no sense for you to have to lie about wanting to go off and do whatever. You're grown. Just say what you want to do and do it. I don't understand why we're lying and deceiving and all this stuff. It's ridiculous. But anyway, yeah, that's all. Next week, I will be reviewing 5 Types of People Who Can Ruin Your Life by Bill Eddy. So this is going to be a good one. It's about high conflict personalities and personality disorders. So this is going to be a really good nonfiction read for next week. And that is all. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. I hope everyone has a great weekend. Thank you.